So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Lisa, and I'm a game designer at Google. I'm currently working on gaming on the Google Assistant platform, and I've been designing games for casual players for the last decade. I started designing massively multiplayer games for kids at Disney, then I moved to Facebook games at Zynga, and then to games on mobile. I joined Google to design voice games for the Google Assistant 4 years ago, and this is before the Google Home was even launched.
That's amazing. I'm not a huge gamer, and I have a Google Assistant, and I know that I like to like ask it things and play games with it. Even though like I don't play games on anything else, it's just always so much fun. So that's really
Oh, yeah,
cool.
awesome.
Yeah. So what does a typical day in your role look like?
It's hard to describe a typical day working for Google, which also makes it a really exciting place to work. But if I summarize really broadly, I might be collaborating with the design and engineering teams on some new voice experiences, putting together presentations, supporting other teams on any projects that might require game design thinking. And I might even be tuning into talks and expanding my design thinking or just learning about random things. But I'm also a big advocate for self care, so I make sure I
Yes.
take an hour during lunch to fit in a workout and tea breaks. And I also join in on fun conversations with my fun and talented coworkers, especially now that we don't get to see each other in person.
Yes, that's so important, especially like now that we're all work from home. The first few months we were work from home, I was forgetting to eat like lunch, and I get so cranky by like 4 or 5 p.m. So I've definitely made it a point to take that like 1 hour break for
Yeah,
myself.
totally. Yeah, you need some routine in your life.
Yeah, for sure. So in your role, what skills would you say are like do you use the most or are the most important?
At their core, both game design and conversation design are types of user experience design. And I think that understanding and applying basic UX principles are super important. One of my designer friends once said that empathy is the most important skill, which I've been taking to heart ever since. As a designer, we need to really understand who we're building our products for, and that means checking in with users frequently through metrics, testing, and qualitative research. Design really is an incremental process that requires fine tuning over time. Another skill that I think is critical is understanding systems design. A product is never built in a silo at Google, it's always a part of something much bigger. As designers, we need to be architects to make sure that each product fits into the larger vision. All these different components can take us as a team, brand, and as a company. It's always a good idea to stop and assess whether your design is still heading in the right direction or you need to kind of steer it back on course.
Hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that, especially the metrics part. I feel like metrics is such a hot word, like for me, for like everyone that I'm talking to in the conversation design or voice design field right now, because you don't know how things are performing, right? If you don't have the metrics and you're not looking at it and iteratively improving on it.
Right, right. Yeah, it's really important to kind of tune in and, figure out what your users need and tuning into, all of the things that they might be asking for, either quantitatively or qualitatively.
Yes, for sure. I actually ordered these like giant posters that define what quantitative and qualitative research and data are, and I'm going to put them right behind me, and I'm really excited for them because I feel like I reference both so often and people just never understand what I'm saying, and then I sound like a broken record where I start like defining them. So I'm excited to just
Mhm.
like point behind me and be like, that's what it means.
Oh,
Um,
perfect.
yeah.
I love that.
So I have been a conversation designer for a little over a year now. And one thing that I've constantly struggled with, that I know that a lot of people in the field are struggling with, are the tools used. Um, I feel like, user experience design has like a set of tools that are now like um, pretty solidified because it's a field that's a little bit older. Conversation design being like a newer design field, I feel like everyone kind of uses the tools that help them the best. So what tools do you use at Google?
I actually like to stick to kind of the basics. I use Google Slides a lot because it's so versatile and easy to use.
Yeah.
Of course, they're good for presentations, but they've been surprisingly good for quick, low fidelity prototypes. I use it for mocking up voice experiences, actually,
Oh, wow.
especially since there's a plugin for quickly inserting the Google Assistant TTS.
Oh, I didn't know
Um,
that. That's so cool.
yeah, yeah, and of course you can have accompanying visuals and short animations using the existing functionalities in Google Slides if you want to mock up voice experiences for smart displays and mobile. But other than that, we use Google Docs, Sheets, and internal tools built for our team. But yeah, I just love sticking to the basics because it just makes it so much faster to, quickly solidify concepts.
For sure, that makes sense. I didn't know that Google Slides had that plugin. That's really, really cool. I'm gonna check that out later. So out of curiosity, how did you get started in the voice AI space?
Yeah, I fell into the voice assistant space kind of unexpectedly. Before joining Google, like I mentioned, I designed casual social and mobile games for about a decade, and I always evolved with the casual games industry, finding new and exciting platforms and discovering fresh ways to play. And this opportunity designing voice games at Google opened up, and honestly, at the time, I wasn't familiar with this field at all. It was challenging ramping up because when I started 4 years ago, the voice assistant field wasn't very well defined.
Right.
Um, and like I mentioned in my intro, the Google Home hadn't even launched yet.
Yeah.
But it was also really exciting because it meant that I could help define what voice game experiences could become. And since then, I've been able to share my learnings and help different teams at Google develop guidelines and principles of game design that work within this boundary of conversation design.
That's super cool. What would you say like your favorite part of your role is currently?
I would say my favorite thing about my role is being able to collaborate with different disciplines and teams. There are engineers and product managers like you might expect from a tech company. But before Google, I hadn't really had a chance to work with conversation designers and user experience researchers. And it's exciting to pull together creative solutions from everyone on the team, then design and implement the best options. I think
Yeah.
ultimately what makes a design feel solid and high quality are the finishing touches. And in the final sprint towards launching, everyone's contributing to make sure that no details are left out. And that's always my favorite part of design.
Yeah, mine too, for sure. So we have a ton of viewers that are constantly asking, like what advice people have for like getting into the field. I know that the conversation design, the voice AI space, they're really hot fields right now. So what advice would you have for someone that say wants to enter the field and sharpen their skill set?
Sure. So, like I mentioned earlier, I stumbled upon the assistant space through my career in game design. And at the core of these two fields is user experience design. And I think it's impossible to become a UX designer unless you actually use the products that you're designing, and critically thinking about the quality of all the features within those products. So I would suggest trying different kinds of voice experiences on different platforms and familiarize yourself with what's out there in this field. You can take those learnings to build experiences of your own and get comfortable with the design iteration process. You'll build something, apply the same critical thinking to your own work, and rework the design until you're ready to move on. And I think working towards building your experience, knowledge, and skill set in the voice assistant space can help you move into this field.
You said that you were in this field for about 4 years now, which is a long time. Like I've talked to a lot of people, and that's longer than the average person, just because the field is so new. What like changes have you seen in the last couple of years?
Um, I think definitely the field's become more solidified. I think, like my teammates and I kind of joke that in the beginning it was kind of like the Wild West where there's
Yeah.
just like no rules. But
Mm-hmm.
I touched upon this in some of my other answers, but we were kind of just trying to come up with principles and guidelines as we were going along. And we were just going through like the design iteration process and seeing what worked and what didn't, and then making sure we had like a blueprint
Yeah.
for making sure that we had consistency across all of our experiences. So that's been kind of a really big major thing is we've been able to put together these guidelines and principles and share these learnings with not just within Google but outside of Google as well.
Yeah.
I've also seen a lot of voice assistant and conversation design efforts outside of Google. That's
Yeah.
been really exciting. Of course, Women in Voice is one,
Hmm.
but I think it's really cool that it's, this field's been kind of, people are noticing this field and excited about experimenting and trying out different experiences.
Yeah, for sure. When I first started, I remember looking for resources, and one of the only things I could find was Google's conversation design. It's like a guide or a library, which I'm sure you know. But it was amazing, and I remember reading through it, and it was where I got my start and like where I learned like everything. And just earlier this week, I was helping onboard a new team member, and I was just like quickly scanning for resources, and it seems like there's so many more now. Like there's courses and like webinars and all of these different things you can do, which is really exciting.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's really exciting. It's still like I feel like we're still, learning a lot in this field, but it's
Mhm.
definitely come a long way in the past
Yeah,
4 years.
yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
And then this is my favorite question to ask people. What would you say your favorite voice experience is?
Um, so my favorites are the short and simple experiences, the ones that are really high quality, that we built on the Google Assistant by
Hmm.
our team. So for example, animal sounds is a really delightful
Yeah.
experience because part of the fun is discovering all the different animals the assistant knows.
Hmm.
You can ask the assistant something like, "What does a bald eagle sound
Oh,
like?"
yeah.
Which, by the way, is not going to sound anything like you imagine. It doesn't actually have the stereotypical bald eagle sound.
Hmm.
Um, and eventually, you might find your way to mythical creatures like unicorns and dragons. And of course, voice assistants rely so much on having a really rich audio experience.
Yeah.
So, a feature like animal sounds with high quality sound effects can really bring these experiences to life. Um, I also love our roll die feature because it's so satisfying with the visuals, the sound effects, and the TTS working really beautifully together. I think designing a product that's delightful at every moment is really difficult, and this feature does this really well. And with roll a die, there's also an exploration aspect to it where you can try all the different dice combinations and see where they all look like. It was challenging anticipating and designing for all these different edge cases, and it's even harder figuring out where to draw the line when the combination of dice is basically infinite.
Yeah, I can imagine. I love that you mentioned animal sounds because when I babysit, I always use it to be like, what does a cat sound like? What does a dog sound like? And have the kids go looking for those animals.
Mhm.
And I didn't know there were unicorns or like mythical creatures. That's really interesting. I'm going to check that out afterwards.
Yeah, yeah, that's so great to hear. I love that.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. It's awesome. So Lisa, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Aisha.
Yeah.